Oh, I'm so bored with modern worship music. It's so boring. It's the same thing over and over again. I hear that so many times, and I'm like, part of me is like, yeah, you're kind of right. Some of it isn't very good, but part of me is like, I don't think that you really understand what corporate worship is supposed to be about. So if you think that modern worship music is boring, let me provide you with an alternative perspective that might shed some light on why it is that way. And first of all, I will note that yes, some modern worship music is boring, especially if you're only listening to what's on the radio, because that's pop music, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if it's pop music on mainstream secular radio or if it's pop music on Christian radio. It's going to be watered down to try to reach as many people as possible. And by the way, I'm not necessarily talking about radio songs, so to speak, in this video. What I'm talking about are the songs that we sing on Sunday morning. And maybe part of the problem is that your church does just sing songs from the radio on Sunday mornings. So I'm willing to admit that that could be part of the problem. But what I want to talk about is if you are part of a worship team, how you should be thinking about the music that you pick and whether you should be thinking this song doesn't scratch my musical itch and therefore it's a bad song and I don't want to do it because I'm bored with it. And it all starts with this. It starts with understanding the biblical purpose for music in our corporate worship services. And that purpose is summed up in Colossians 3:16, which says, "Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God." And I think that verse reveals three priorities for our singing in our corporate gatherings. The first reason is this: to teach and admonish. That means that the songs that we sing should be filled with things that actually teach and admonish. They should be filled with doctrine that teaches and admonishes the people of our church as we all sing to one another, not just the worship team singing to people, but everybody in our church singing to one another. But I think flowing from that, that means that the lyrics that we sing should be clear. And when that happens, that means that we have to tamp down a bit on the artistry and the poetry of our lyrics so that people can be taught and admonished through them. I'm not saying that there is no poetry and we're just speaking words and things never rhyme or anything like that. I'm just saying that there is a limitation then on the lyrics that we sing because the lyrics that we sing are designed to teach and admonish. So that's the first reason that we sing according to the Bible. The second thing we learned from Colossians 3:16 is that when we sing, we're supposed to do it to one another. That means that it is a participatory act of everyone in the church singing together, not just the people on stage, not just some special music act that where somebody sings at people, but we are all supposed to be singing to one another. And that means that we need to create songs that allow that to happen, meaning they probably shouldn't be super complex anyways, because then that confuses people. And if the goal is to get people to sing together to one another, everyone singing, then we do need to tamp that down as well a little bit so that everybody can sing together. And then the third reason that we sing is to do it with thankfulness in our hearts to God. And that's with the words that we sing. I think it also relates to the skill with which we play the songs. I think that we can do that as an act of worship to God, that we worship God through the way that we play the songs, but the way that we play those songs, speaking of intricacy of our musical parts and whatnot, that skill should keep in mind that the songs are meant to teach and admonish and that we're supposed to do it with one another. And by the way, if you want more information on that or to help teach your team that truth, then check out Why We Sing, a study of Colossians 3:16. It's my 4-week worship team devotional that I put together focused on this very topic. Why do we sing in church? So check that out down in the description below. But now that we know the criteria of what we're looking for in our songs, I want to point out that that criteria means that there is compromise in musical interestingness when it comes to the music that we use in our worship services. And that might be why you feel like modern worship music is boring, or just music in general in the church is boring, is because music in the church, yes, it is artistic, but it is also functional. It exists for a reason, and those two things need to go hand in hand. The ultimate goal of music in our worship services, and mind you again, I'm only speaking of in our worship services here, the ultimate goal is not to be as artistic as possible. And you, as a musician, might want amazing things out of the music in your worship services. There might be musical intricacies that you would love to hear. You would love to hear amazing melodies that span beyond 2 octaves, because that would be really interesting. You might want to hear a melody that jumps crazy intervals, because that would be interesting. You might want to hear a guitar part where somebody's just shredding the entire time because you're a guitarist, and you'd be like, that would be really impressive. You might want to hear lyrics that are interesting and poetic and cause you to think, wow, that's an interesting image. I wonder what that means. But, like I said, the purpose of music in our gatherings is not just to be musically interesting. It is to glorify God, yes, through our musical skill, but it also must be able to teach and admonish the people in our church, and we must be able to do it together. So if you're bored with worship music, keep that in mind. Perhaps you're bored with music in your church because it's fulfilling the function of what the Bible says that we're supposed to do. And should we be playing on the worship team at our church to get our musical yayas out of it? No, there's a specific reason for music in our church, and it's not for the worship team to be musically fulfilled on Sundays. Now, let me also make the distinction that I've already mentioned in this video, but let me expand on it, that when I'm talking this way, I'm not talking about all Christian music. There can be music that exists outside of our church gatherings that is musically interesting. I'm fine with that. I don't think that God puts limits on that music, other than moral limits and the general limits that the Bible imposes morally. I don't think God imposes limits on those in terms of the function of it. So I'm just talking about corporate worship music here. I'm not talking about the songs even that you hear on the radio, because some of those weren't meant to be used in corporate worship, although I think sometimes people just think because a song is popular, we should use it in corporate worship. So you could also apply the information that you learned in this video to your song selection as well, in terms of, should we do this song on Sunday because it's popular or because it fulfills the criteria of what God wants us to use music for on Sundays. But let's start using then the music outside of our Sunday mornings to glorify God. And we can do that. We can create beautiful music. You can glorify God artistically to your fullest extent without those other limitations, or I don't want to call them limitations, I think they're considerations, but maybe it does limit your artistry. You can glorify God in your artistry outside of Sunday mornings. You don't have to use it in Sunday mornings in that way, because that's not how God commanded us to use music in our services in that way. But that doesn't mean that you can't do it the other, 167 hours of the week. So have at it. Create amazing music that's not designed for corporate worship, and create amazing music that's designed for corporate worship, but still allows us to teach and admonish one another. And I want you to notice that when you apply that definition and understand that there is a distinction between corporate worship music and just Christian music, so to speak, in general. When you make that distinction, you realize that there is a whole world of Christian music that can exist apart from corporate worship music. This can exist and be artistically amazing, and it doesn't mean that we need to do it during a church service. And it opens up a lot more possibilities for you to appreciate so-called Christian worship music. There are over 600,000 songs in the CCLI database, and that's just the songs in the CCLI database. That's not even, I don't even think like an indie Christian band would have their songs in the CCLI database. I'm sure there are millions of songs, millions of Christian worship songs, tens of millions maybe, because everybody can create music easily these days. And I'm sure that you can find something interesting. So you have my permission, not that you need my permission, but you have my permission to listen to songs that don't fulfill the function of teaching and admonishing one another outside of a Sunday morning gathering. But when you gather for Sunday morning, that should be the design of your songs. And then when it comes to not feeling musically fulfilled on Sunday, you're like, these songs are kind of boring. I would just encourage you to find some way to be musically fulfilled outside of a Sunday morning gathering. I think so many, and I know that this was true for me, and that's why I'm saying it, I think for a lot of worship team members, that has become like their band outlet. And it's sort of like, I always wanted to be in a band growing up, and listen, now there's a band at church, and I could be in a band at church. But not understanding that that band at church, so to speak, that worship team, music team, serves a different function than just a band outside of church. So don't use the church as your musical outlet but find other musical outlets. I'm not saying don't use your gifts to serve in the church. I'm saying that if you have a musical itch that needs to be scratched, it might not be scratched in the church. Find other musical outlets to express your Christian faith even outside of the church. I'm not just saying go join some secular rock band because you want to play music. I'm saying use music for other functions outside of the church, but don't use music for a function that it wasn't intended for in the church. And if you want help communicating this difference between corporate worship music and just Christian music in general, check out down in the description below my devotional called Why We Sing. It is a 4-week worship team devotional that takes you through a study of Colossians 3:16, which will break down the biblical reasons for music in our services. Those being to teach and admonish one another, to sing to one another, and to glorify God while we do it. So check that out down in the description below. Other than that, until I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.